We've got to unite. This is no time for us to stand on the sidelines. We remember the words from more than 100 years ago from Teddy Roosevelt. He said, we got to get out of the cheap seats and we got to get into the arena. That means you've got to be willing to get bruised and bloodied right alongside of us. There's no question. I see Julia here. I see Marla here. I see other candidates. Robert, you're here. Other candidates here. Ryan's here. I mean, frankly, folks, we need you there with us side by side because we're going to take some slings and arrows. We can't not, because you know as well as I do that there is a new normal emerging, and that's why we're so compelled to be here. It's because we're seeing things that we just couldn't imagine. Let's just ask ourselves this one. What did Duluth do last Monday? They hired another prosecuting attorney. They know there's a problem. What is Tim Walz telling us? He's saying, gee, the winds of politics are telling me I better get tough on crime. So he says, let's have a special session and do something for public safety. He's not had any interest at all. We're seeing in the schools, we're seeing an absolute departure from a foundational education for kids. And we're seeing, we're going to teach these kids critical race theory. We're going to teach them that what they accomplish, what they do, doesn't matter. It wasn't because of what their efforts were. It was because of the color of their skin. We have abbreviations, ESG scores, DEI things. I mean, it makes our heads spin. And so we're saying we've got to be a part of what is this new normal going to look like. If you go back to the word conservative, that word comes from Latin, conservare, and it means to safeguard. That's what we're standing for. Is the Republican Party right on all the things? No. We need a makeover. We need to do some things better. But we know that the conservative principles that we elevate are what have to prevail. And the things we safeguard are faith and family and freedom and the Founding Fathers' wisdom and less government. Those are the things we stand for. We stand for life. We stand for life not just at the beginning, but we stand for it at the end. That's why we are so horrified by what happened over the last 2.5 years when we saw so many frail elderly people having to die alone in nursing homes after Governor Walz's policies, as well as Governor Cuomo's policies in New York, literally pipelined active COVID disease into the nursing homes. And once that happened, was there any humane effort at all to help these folks? No. They were locked in and families were locked out. I remember Eric Paulson calling me, and he was just devastated because his dad died. His dad died unattended. Eric wasn't able to get there. He wasn't able to hold his hand. He wasn't able to preserve his dignity, make sure he wasn't air hungry, make sure that he wasn't lying in his own urine. He couldn't get to him. Behind a pane of glass, he watched his dad die. We saw that happen to so many of us. This is a legacy that we will hold from this COVID-19 pandemic. This is the new normal that we object to, and we're not going to allow it to continue. At the end of the day, you can talk about public safety, you can talk about school choice, and you can talk about the fact that I have patients in my office crying because they don't know if they should spend their last $100 on groceries for the family or filling up their gas tank. We know those are the issues. We know that if you have inflation of 9.1% and you're getting one of the biggest raises you've gotten in years, you get a 6% raise and you're losing ground, we know that I don't care what Governor Walz says about the unemployment rate, the economy isn't okay. And the reason the unemployment rate's so low is we have had so many people between 60 and 80 say, I'm checking out. I was willing to be a part of the workforce. I was willing to help out, but I'm done. I have seen what you have done to me. If you look at the number of Minnesotans that are working right now and compared to pre-COVID, we're not back to pre-COVID levels. That's why you've got unemployment rates so low. It's a fictitious metric that people will use and say the economy's okay. The economy is not okay. It's going to get worse, and if you think it's okay, you must be on the Democratic side of the aisle because you got your head in the sand. It's that simple. So what we're going to do this time around is we're going to see a leadership contrast. You're going to see someone like Marla Helseth, and you're going to see someone stand up and speak truth to power, even if it gets her in trouble. And if she doesn't know how to get in trouble by speaking truth to power, call me. I can help you with that. But we're also going to see a resistance to groupthink. We are not going to fall into groupthink. As conservatives, we have got to raise the banner and say, listen, folks, we need you by us. We need you to tell us when we have a good idea and when we have a bad idea. Because quite frankly, I make mistakes every day. I have gone into my office and told my staff, hey, I came up with a brainstorm, let's do this. And by the time the day's over, I realized that it was one of the most numbskull ideas I'd come up with in a week. But I'll tell you what's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea to stop taxing Social Security twice. We should not be doing that, but we should push it. We should push the conversation and say, okay, we got a $10 to $12 billion overpayment. What about using now as the time to talk about what would Minnesota look like if we had no personal income tax? What kind of an economic hub would we be? If we could bring Fortune 500 companies to Minnesota instead of having them exit, what would that do? The last time we had a Fortune 500 company come to Minnesota was 2004 Mosaic, and they have since left. We have not had a Fortune 500 company come to Minnesota in 18 years. We have got to ask ourselves, if we would pare down our spending, if we would become the sizzling economic hub of the Midwest, could we get to a point through a phased-in process where we would no longer have a personal income tax? That's the kind of leadership you're going to get from Ryan, from Julia, from Bob, from Marla. We're going to also stand up, and we're not going to flinch, because you're going to be at our side. You're going to stand there and say, Doc, you don't need to flinch. You don't have to back down, because we're right there in the arena with you, side by side. And folks, we will speak for all voices. I remember Hubert Humphrey saying in the 50s, where he said, we need to speak for those at the beginning of the life, for those at the end of the lives, and we need to speak for those who live in the shadows of life. And that's what we need to do. I know that the country may not have had the robust conversation that we need to have, but Julia Coleman has been leading the charge and saying, what would some sort of paid family leave support or paid maternity leave look like? We have got to lead that conversation. We can no longer afford to be the party of not talking about the hard ideas. When I talk to millennials and Gen Zs, they ask me, what does corporate responsibility look like when Pfizer makes 50% of its gross revenues from one product for which it has no liability? What does it look like to be corporately responsible? What does consumer protection look like if Pfizer isn't going to take responsibility and you get harmed by taking a product of theirs? What does that look like? What is the Republican plan for conservation and protection of our resources and protection of our water look like? Folks, we can and must lead on these issues. We cannot shove them to the side. We will lead on the big issues, but we will have the conversations on all the issues. And if you want to contrast that kind of leadership to Tim Walz, you know what he does. You saw him freeze. He does it over and over again. And I think we can cut him slack if you freeze once. But I spent the afternoon today on Lake Street touring the 3rd precinct, looking at the devastated grounds, looking at the buildings that have been replaced, looking at the sand lots that have just broken down bricks. And I asked myself, did Governor Walz ever say, folks, this is on me? I'm sorry? Did he ever tell us that, if my daughter is tweeting the position of the National Guard, she shouldn't have been doing that? I never heard that. Folks, if you're apologetic for something, generally there's some level of remorse. You say, I could have done better. That's on me. But he froze when it came to the 3rd precinct. And he froze when it came to having the National Guard on the street. And that's why we had journalists on TV saying, where is our governor? And he froze 2 weeks later when he said to the State Patrol, stand down. If the demonstrators want to tear down the Christopher Columbus statue, let them. And then a few weeks ago, even knowing that the 4th of July could be problematic for Minneapolis, Jacob Fry knew it. Tim Walz did nothing to prepare. And at the end of the day, isn't it his job to prepare and protect and preserve? And do you feel like that's happening? That's what this campaign is going to be all about, the sharp contrast in leadership. And Minnesotans are electrified, saying, this is not okay. This is not okay where we're at. So here we stand. We know that we have to unleash the energies of all Minnesotans. We have to have a big tent out there. Marla's going to help us build a big tent out there. Her voice is going to be unique and exceptional, and it's going to be different than Scott Jensen. But we're going to stand for the same darn conservative principles that give us our moral compass. And that's what we need at the end of the day more than anything. You need to know, what is your moral compass? And your moral compass is driven by your convictions. And your convictions are driven by the consistency of action. And that's what we're going to be about. Marla, I celebrate your candidacy. I'm so excited for you. So in closing, I just want to say this, folks. Over the last 2.5 years, all of us have suffered some pretty strong heartbreak watching people's lives turned upside down. We've seen the suicides. We've seen the sorrowful deaths. We have seen the suicidal ideation. We have seen the Gen Zs and the millennials. We've seen their lives turned upside down. We've seen their last junior and senior years in high school turned upside down. We've denied them so much. We've seen the policies of locking in, locking down, and locking out fail over and over again. And we have had a governor that continuously holds up his finger to see which way are the political winds blowing. That's going to stop. We are taking the fight to Tim Walz. And with people like